Great. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name's Jennifer Griffith, and I work at NEWMOA, which is the Northeast Waste Management Officials Association. And we're here today to present on a project that we've been working with Erie County, New York on, in partnership with Leanpath as well. And we're going to start by talking more generally about food waste reduction efforts in food service kitchens, and then we'll move more into the case study that we worked on. And I just want to give a few logistical things first. So we have a lot of people joining us today, so we will not be able to do questions sort of in a live format. But you can type them in at any point in your control panel there for GoToWebinar. There is a questions section, and you can type in a question that you have at any point during the webinar. I think we're going to hold questions until the end, unless there's really something that people aren't understanding. And then if there is, we will butt in to somebody's presentation time. But otherwise, I think we'll hold questions till the end. So we are recording the webinar today, and we will be posting a PDF of the slides. So I just wanted to show people I've got the NEWMOA website open here, and because I have the GoToWebinar stuff, I can't necessarily do all the navigation. But so let's see here. I gotta move things. So I just wanted to show people the NEWMOA website, and then we will have under events. If you go, then there is this webinar today. So the event will post the PDF of the slides here, as well as a link to the recording when that's ready. And the default view is just showing anything that's upcoming. So a good way to find the webinar after the fact is, oops, sorry about that, is to use the month feature here. And then if you just remember that the webinar was in December, then you'll be able to find it here, the link to it. We will also post the slides and information under the materials management program under the project page. So don't want to linger on that very long here. So I will start the slideshow. And there we go. So I think that's it for logistics. Like I said, type in questions at any point, but we'll hold them till the end. So today we have 4 speakers to talk about this. We'll have Tyler Hamilton, who works in Erie County, New York. He works for the Department of Environment and Planning in Erie County. His work is focused around solid waste and recycling, specifically in the areas of food waste reduction and composting. So he currently oversees a composting program that you'll hear a little more about later at the Erie County Correctional Facility. And before working on solid waste and recycling, he managed habitat restoration projects also for Erie County. And he has a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Engineering from the University at Buffalo. Then you'll also hear from myself eventually. And so I'm Jennifer Griffith with NEWMOA, which is the Northeast Waste Management Officials Association. Again, you'll see a slide on that in a minute. And I'm a project manager here and was the project manager for this project that we're presenting about. We also have presenting Stephanie Frisch, who's also from NEWMOA. And she is a project manager here at NEWMOA. She supports the Interstate Chemicals Clearinghouse, the High Priority Chemicals Data System. She's also been working on a craft brewery project and a variety of the solid waste projects here at NEWMOA, including this one. She, prior to working here, she was a researcher in laboratories at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. She's got her Bachelor of Science in Environmental Science, Biology, and Conservation Biology. And then lastly, we have Clare Cooper, who is from Leanpath, and in here. She recently joined the business development team at Leanpath to get practical food waste prevention strategies into more kitchens. She has a background in sustainable development, food systems, and hospitality, and she's got degrees from Dickinson College and the University of Queensland. Before joining Leanpath, she supported the Pledge on Food Waste, a global certification for restaurants that are tackling waste in their kitchens. So she's got a lot of expertise. Now, I just need to turn my webcam off and turn this over to Tyler. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer. Just one thing quickly. We have a lot of slides to get through, and to be mindful of time, I might be going through some of the slides quite quickly. So if you have any questions as we're going along, as Jennifer mentioned, feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll try to address them at the end of our presentation. And the slides, as Jennifer also mentioned, will be posted online after the presentation. So just to begin, the project partners that were involved, Erie County Department of Environment and Planning, NEWMOA, Northeast Waste Management Officials Association, Met's Culinary Management, and Leanpath, as were introduced earlier in the presentation. Next slide, please. A little bit about the Department of Environment and Planning. We work on various different environmental-based efforts, environmental stewardship programs throughout Erie County with a goal of making the county a better place through its efforts. Next slide. A little bit about NEWMOA. They were formed in the 1980s by New England governors. They currently work in many of the northeastern United States, the states in the Northeast, on a lot of different solid waste and hazardous waste management items. Next slide. Met's Culinary Management, they work on, globally, they work in different large-scale kitchens, including healthcare, corporate, educational, and airport kitchens. They provide services like dining management, ready-to-eat meals, catering, things like that. Within the United States, they have a quite a big range, pretty much all along the east coast of the United States. And then Leanpath, they have a mission of making food waste and prevention and measurement a practice in kitchens worldwide. They started in 2004 and have since grew to having thousands of kitchens worldwide that participate with utilizing their tracking tools. They have offices in the United States, the United Kingdom, and Singapore, and offer a variety of very sophisticated food waste tracking systems that include integrated scales, cameras, touchscreens, and different software to kind of take the gathered data and portray it in a way that's easily digestible and something that you can work with. And there'll be a demo later in the presentation to kind of highlight more about what their tool can offer. So some background on our presentation. In 2019, New York State passed a law for food scrap donation and recycling that required large-scale food waste generators, which was defined by generators that produce more than two tons of food waste per week, to donate all of their edible food and recycle the remaining food if they are within 25 miles of a organics recycler, which include composting, anaerobic digestion, or animal feed. So that kind of sparked the interest in this program to track and mitigate food waste as a result of this law. one thing to note is that with the New York State law, hospitals, nursing homes, adult care facilities, and K through 12 schools are exempt from this law. But I'll get a little bit into why we still worked with hospitals, I think on the next slide, despite the fact that they were exempt from this law. So Erie County was awarded funding from New York State Department of Environmental Conservation in late 2019. The original focus for this project was to work in large-scale restaurants, which were not exempt from that food waste law. But however, shortly after the grant was awarded in 2020, the pandemic began, and many of the restaurants that we had initially planned on working with closed. So we kind of had to pivot our focus, and we decided to start working with healthcare facilities as their kitchens remained open throughout the duration of the pandemic. So um, we kind of switched gears. It took a little while to find partners and get things going. Mets joined on in early 2021, and there were still many issues and problems, staffing challenges with the pandemic. They're very understaffed, and so it was kind of put on hold from September 2021 through January of this year. So we really got one good year of great tracking data all throughout 2023. And we'll kind of get into a little more of the details on what was tracked later on. A little bit of kind of project components that and outputs of the project. We worked on developing a case study, which kind of encapsulates all of the different components of the program from start to finish within these healthcare facilities. And that is going to be published very soon, sometime this month. And then secondly, a food waste guide on reducing food waste in commercial kitchens, also published this month. And then lastly, education and outreach. We presented on November 16th at the New York State NISAR 3 annual conference in Cooperstown, New York. And then we had a presentation at the Roswell Park Cancer Institute on December 5th, where we talked to the Roswell and Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus staff from their kitchens. And then finally, this webinar that you all are on today. So why focus on food waste? When you look at all the solid waste that's generated, food waste makes up over 20% of that. So it's a large chunk of overall waste, and something that shouldn't be ignored. Wasted food equals wasted resources. There's a lot that goes into food generation, and things that you might not think about. There's money, land, water, energy, all these different things that go into outputted food, not just the food itself. So by mitigating the total food waste that you generate, you're saving all along the supply chain, not just the value of the food itself. And then a big picture, decreasing food waste and stopping it from entering the landfill is not only sustainable, it conserves resources and reduces greenhouse gases and saves money. So a lot of benefits to being mindful of that and tracking your food waste and mitigating it. So a little bit about the project and kind of how things were laid out. When you're looking at food waste generated in a kitchen, there's really four kind of loss reasons that are predominant. Overproduction and spoilage is if you were to make too much food, put it out on the hot food line, and not all of it gets served, and it's spoiled, you'd have to throw it out. Secondly, over ordering, so make too much food. Again, those two are a little bit similar, but over ordering. And then equipment malfunction, if a refrigerator was to go down, or things like that. You get a lot of spoilage that way. And then quality problems if you were to burn a batch of food or drop it on the floor or things like that, and it can't be served for that reason. And then food waste costs money. So the typical waste, when you purchase food, you're typically going to be wasting on average 4 to 10% of all food that you purchase. And when you waste food, you're wasting labor that goes into preparing that food, the disposal costs that you have to pay when you're getting rid of your food waste, and the energy costs that go into preparing and creating that food are all things that you are all money revenue or streams that you lose out on when you're producing excess food waste. So it's good to be mindful and cut down on that 4 to 10% and try to get it as low as possible. And then some benefits of preventing food waste. Kind of mentioned some of these already, but there's less trash going into your solid waste bins, less to manage, less to pay for. Food waste is generally a very heavy waste stream. There's a lot of water content to it, and so when you remove that from the waste stream, the costs go down quite significantly because your overall waste stream is a lot lighter. And then reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Food waste is quite a high methane generator within landfills. So by diverting it from the source, you're creating less of a greenhouse effect. And then the money savings, as I already mentioned, purchasing costs will decrease, labor costs decrease as you are not producing food that's ultimately just going to waste or to a landfill. So you could divert that labor into more valuable efforts. And then trash disposal fees. And there's percentages kind of listed for all three of those as like the typical impact that they have on the overall food chain. And then fewer wasted resources, things like land, water, energy, labor, and all go into the creation of these food products. And by mitigating your overall waste, you're saving on all of those different aspects. And then here is the New York State EPA's food waste scale. This is a new model that was put out earlier this year. It used to be kind of a pyramid kind of hierarchy scale. This is a very similar scale. And you could see prevented food waste on the left-hand side there is they have listed as the most beneficial way to treat or manage your food waste. And then all the other options in the lighter shades of green are all kind of secondary uses for food waste, things to do once your food waste has already been generated. And then lastly, down the drain, landfill, incinerate is the worst kind of end use for food waste. So all those light green options are just various different ways you can work on diverting your waste, and we'll talk about all four of those later on in the presentation.
As Jennifer mentioned early on in the presentation, one of the project materials is a guide for reducing food waste from food service kitchens. This will be available on the NEWMOA website in the next couple weeks. Next slide, please. So food waste management is focused in three main areas, as Tyler was discussing earlier. First is just preventing food waste at the source, producing less. The second would be to donate any edible food to local food programs. And the third would be to recycle either through animal feed, anaerobic digestion, or compost. There are many steps to start, but the first one is you need management buy-in. It's necessary to focus on observations, measurement, and developing alternatives in the kitchen. It's important to educate the staff. You have to provide resources, and also it's great to ask for ongoing suggestions from the staff who are witnessing the overproduction and food waste on a daily basis. The second is to assess the current situation, making sure to note the waste that's produced, its source, such as time of day, as well as location, and the loss reason that Tyler was discussing. It's ideal that the quantity is tracked, but it is not necessary, as we'll show on the next slide. And then it's important to contemplate your findings. What are potential options to reduce this waste? Are there any options for donation? And for food recycling, where can these recycling bins be instituted within the kitchen? So observing and measuring food waste, it can be as simple as paper and a pencil right near where you reduce or where you throw away your food. It would be better if the waste is measured as mentioned. It can be use of a simple scale and entering data into a spreadsheet for analysis later on, or it can be the use of a sophisticated tool such as Leanpath, which includes an integrated scale, camera, and computer with software, which can generate summaries and detailed reports and do analysis of the data for you. There will be more info coming later on in the presentation about Leanpath. Preventing wasted food. Reducing wasted food at the source is preferred, but there are many ideas that can be evaluated to reduce this food waste. So first is evaluating the menu options and portions. Observing what the customer purchases and wastes. You can look at the food options. Can one be removed? Can portion size be reduced? Can different portion sizes be offered so that customers have a choice? And can automatically included items such as bread be offered as optional? Another way to prevent food waste is to repurpose the leftovers. Ideally, food that is overproduced can be repurposed. It is important to note that health code requires that any food be cooled and properly stored within 2 hours and reused within 3 days. So there is a time limit for the reusability of this food. One example is for bacon. So when bacon is cooked in the morning, it can be used for breakfast, and if too much is prepared, it can be cooled properly and stored for use. On the second day, it can be used in another meal for breakfast or just as an option in a hot bar. And then if there are still remaining leftovers, it can be cooled and properly stored. And then the third day, if there's still some food remaining, it could be chopped up in the salad bar to be an addition as a salad topper. And unfortunately, any food that has reached day 3 and has not been consumed, it must be wasted in some way, hopefully recycled though. Additional ways for reusing leftovers could include soup or making other breakfast options or pizzas. Another idea is inventory management. Looking at items thrown away, are they thrown away because of the best buy date? Is too much food being purchased at once? Could less food be purchased at a time? Are items being forgotten in the back of storage? Could improvements be made for how overproduced food is managed? And for the leftovers that are wasted, can there be greater awareness of how these leftovers can be reused and what is available for reuse? And one idea is also, can there be incentives instituted for staff to successfully reuse these leftovers and be rewarded for their part in reducing food waste? Another option, although not always feasible at such large scales, is considering cooking to order. One of the hospitals that we toured was smaller, and so they were able to focus on a portion of their meals as cooked to order rather than producing large meals. So that would just be something that would be helpful if it was feasible. And then another idea is small batch cooking. This can help minimize leftovers by minimizing the amount of food that's cooked at once. For example, in one of our hospitals, they need to prepare 500 inpatient meal trays, which can take several hours. Instead of cooking all these 500 meals at once, they utilize small batch cooking and cook 2 trays at a time. And once they get to the second tray, they have a better estimate of how much food they will still need, so they're able to cook the next tray of food so that if there is leftover, it's only a tray to 2 trays of overproduced food rather than many trays. And then this, as mentioned before, this food can be cooled and stored if it is not used for its original purpose. If the kitchen is short-staffed, it can be difficult to cook in small batches and overproduction can result, but this is a great way to try and reduce that. It is also important to note that date labels doesn't necessarily equal safety. Although this is difficult to apply in commercial kitchen settings, it can be applied in our day-to-day lives. Misunderstanding leads to a lot of food waste, and there are no government requirements for date labels in New York State except for baby formula, which is a federal requirement. This may not be true in all states. However, this project was focused on New York State, so the next following slides will have a lot of information about New York. Dates that are determined by the manufacturer are for their top quality guarantee, but a lot of foods are still safe to eat after this date label. Some timelines are posted below. And then as consumers, we can use the look and smell test to see if food is still viable after the date that it's posted. One form of waste prevention is donation. Donation can reduce food by donating edible food. A lot of businesses can receive tax deductions, which increases the economic viability of donation. There are some fact sheets that were created by Harvard Law that for New York State, which can help businesses learn about their rights and abilities to donate. And it's also important to remember that any donated food is for people to eat and it needs to be handled accordingly. This means that all food that is going to be donated has to follow temperature and storage guidelines, which can differ depending on the type of food that is being donated. And all food needs to be well labeled with at least the minimum of ingredients, production date, and storage date. Donors are protected from liability in most cases. Laws protect businesses and nonprofits, and that provide the food donation and receive food donation. Some of these laws include the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Food Donation Act, which protects both individuals and businesses that donate food in good faith. And New York laws further protect these businesses and individuals. Another fact sheet is provided by the Harvard Law School for more information. This slide shows the donation guidelines that are developed by Feeding America. They provide different product types such as prepared meals, packaged meats, perishable goods, and non-perishable items, and the ideal handling and storing requirements, and then their code date requirements for food donation. For example, packaged meats have to be frozen at 0 degrees, and they have to stay frozen before the code date and donated within 3 months after the date it was frozen. Continued, kitchens often generate an inconsistent stream of unused but still edible prepared food, which can make donation difficult. However, finding a flexible food rescue partner and establishing good communication can help this option for food be utilized better. Some rescue partners can't accept frozen items or even refrigerated items, so it's important to make sure you create that connection with your food rescue partner and understand what foods they're able to accept. It's important to look for a good local organization and ideally one that serves hot meals so that they can hopefully accept this prepared food. One example in New York is the Friends of the Night people in Buffalo. Another type of waste prevention is recycling. After all feasible donation, it's important that all remaining food waste is recycled to keep it out of landfills. Recycling benefits include removing food waste from trash. This means there's less trash to manage, it's cleaner, and it's lighter. Removing food waste from landfills is important because it also reduces methane gas generation, which adds to climate change. It reduces moisture, which reduces the quantity of leachate and management of leachate required by landfills. It also reduces the attraction of unwanted wildlife, and as well as the quantity of gas management required by landfills. Steps to successful food scrap recycling include first finding a recycling facility in your area that will accept your food scraps. Second is determining how is this food going to be transported to the facility. Will it be self-transported, or are you going to hire a hauler? And then also separating food scraps from other types of food waste that may not be accepted, as well as practicing proper storage of these food scraps to avoid odors and pests, such as good recycling containers mentioned previously. And then the fifth success step is educating staff about food waste and why recycling is important to increase buy-in to the process. Another type of recycling is, or a type of recycling is for animal feed. Federal laws often regulate the safety of the food scraps and the types of animals that can be fed this food scraps. In New York State, they also have additional laws covering the feeding of food scraps to many animals. Again, there's another fact sheet about this. But generally, any food scraps that contain unprocessed animal products, such as waste meat, must be at least heat treated to commercial sterility before being fed to animals. One tip is that many facilities choose to put unprocessed waste animal products in the trash or go to another form of recycling so that their other food scraps can be fed to non-ruminants such as pig or chicken without this complication of sterility. Another type of recycling is anaerobic digestion, which uses microorganisms to produce biogas and digestate as the products. More than half of the biogas produced is methane, which can be used as a renewable energy source. And the second is digestate, which can be land applied, composted, and used as a soil amendment or produced into fertilizer pellets to amend the soil. And many facilities work with natural upcycling based in Lynn, New York, to collect their food waste and bring it to AD facilities in New York State.
Thanks, Stephanie. I'm going to talk a little bit about composting and then give some information about Erie County's composting operation. So composting is another option that you can utilize for secondary use of food waste. Composting is great because it preserves the nutrients that are innately in the food waste and puts them back into the soil and mitigates the need for any sort of chemical fertilizers or additives to the soil. Some of the components that go into commercial composting are the food waste, obviously, and then some sort of material to add like porosity, and they call them the browns, so like wood chips, things like that. And then you also want to make sure that you maintain adequate moisture, high temperature, and then, like I mentioned, the presence of air to allow for aerobic digestion. So we'll go to the next slide and talk a little bit about Erie County's composting. So Erie County started a composting operation in 2017 at the Alden Correctional Facility. Since then, 109 tons of food waste have been diverted from landfill, which is 96 metric tons of CO2 equivalent. We were able to reduce the size of the trash dumpsters and the frequency of pickups at the correctional facility, which alone led to a savings of roughly $20,000 a year, just in trash disposal fees. And then one thing to note on the kitchen staff from the correctional facility is that they really liked the transition to composting because they didn't have to take as many trash bags out to the dumpster, as they were able to kind of scrape the food waste directly into the organics collection bins, and then those got wheeled out back to the compost pile. So it made their life a lot more convenient in the kitchen. So something to note, composting post-consumer food waste is very challenging, and if you're just getting into um, food waste recycling, I think it's really smart to start with kitchen generated food waste only, as it's much easier to track and manage and collect, and there's just different levels of complication involved with post-consumer food waste, especially with the nature of this program in healthcare facilities. Post-consumer food waste can have potentially disease or different bacteria in it from the healthcare facility, and it just makes it things a lot more challenging. So focusing on kitchen generated food waste is a great place to start. And yeah, we'll go to the next slide. So in essence of composting, when you look at the containers that your food waste is packaged in, it's good to be mindful of biodegradable containers and what that might mean, and if they're actually doing what they say they're doing. So facilities that use biodegradable containers may think that they're being environmentally friendly, but if they're not BPI certified, they may not really be as environmentally friendly as they say that they are. There's a lot of PFAS in packaging, and the BPI certified products are the only ones that are guaranteed to not have PFAS in them. There's a study that found that 57% of food waste containers contain PFAS. So it's really good, and we really recommend that when you're looking for packaging for your food to make sure that it's BPI certified. And then lastly, not all plastics are recyclable. It's different across the country, but here in New York State, at least in our region of New York State, we really only focus on recycling number 1 and number 2 plastics because they have a robust recycling market in our area. But it's good to be mindful of the types of plastics that are recycled in your area of the country, and also to be mindful of purchasing, and when you're purchasing your if they're takeout containers or food single-use containers, to be mindful of the type of plastic that is created by, and does that fall into line with the types of plastics that are commonly recycled in your area. So yeah, we'll pass it along to talk about the case study.
Okay, hi, this is Jennifer. So the case study is published and is posted, so the link is here. And this is kind of what the cover page looks like. So you can get a lot more information about the case study there. So the link will be in the presentation, but then also which will send out an email when we do have the presentation posted. But also you can just go to the website and find the case study. So the project, we worked with 4 different healthcare settings. We worked with 1 small hospital. We worked with 1 assisted living and rehab center. And then we worked with 2 large hospitals. So these were all serviced by METS. Like we said, one of the project partners is METS Culinary Management, and they service all 4 of these facilities. And the small hospital and the assisted living facility each had 1 Leanpath scale installed. And then the 2 large hospitals, because they sort of have a big kitchen that does the inpatient meals and some of the food prep for the retail cafeteria, but then they have like a second floor in the basement where the cafeteria is and the food service there. So They had a Leanpath scale both in the food prep kitchen and also in the kitchen associated with the retail cafeteria. So they each had 2 Leanpath systems. And so the timeline of the project, Tyler mentioned this before. The Leanpath scales were installed in the late spring of 2021 at the 4 facilities. And at the time, they established some baseline data, but it is sort of good to keep in mind that the retail cafeterias really weren't operating very much. They were they were servicing the workers, but there wasn't the kind of variety or the scale of the kitchens when they're really open to the public. But then they really couldn't, with all their staffing challenges and COVID, they really couldn't keep reliably using the scales. And so the whole project, they sort of said, nah, we got to step back here. We can't really continue using the scales reliably. So the project was sort of put on hold. But then in 2022, the retail cafeterias opened to the public. Towards the end of 2022, Mets thought that they were able to maybe focus more on using Leanpath. So we sort of started the project back up in 2023. But then NEWMOA, looking at the data, we realized there's some different categories and some different things that probably should be changed in Leanpath. And it took quite a while to communicate and get the involvement of Mets. So we didn't get things changed in Leanpath until July of just a few months ago. So we really were looking at data just from a relatively short time period that you'll see. So the Leanpath tool, it requires that you enter data for everything that you're going to throw out, including the type of container it's in, the meal time, the loss reason, the type of food, the location it was generated. And so I'll turn it over so we can talk more about the Leanpath system.
Hi there, everyone. We thought it would be useful to kind of do a deeper dive into a demo using a Leanpath system. So just wanted to cover the kind of basic methodology that Leanpath has been using for about 20 years at this point, which is to track, discover, and drive. And we are tracking food waste to collect data, using that data to kind of discover kind of key takeaways and patterns in our food systems operations, and then use that data to drive behavior change, largely in commercial kitchens. While this project was using the Tracker 360 bench scale, we thought it would be useful to kind of do a quick run through of each of the different hardware that Leanpath designs. So from left to right, you're kind of working from smaller kitchens with smaller food spend up to much larger commercial enterprises with much larger food spend and that tend to waste more food. So on the left-hand side, you have Leanpath Go. This is designed to offer food waste tracking by the each. So if you have a grab and go facility or kind of retail outlet within your facility, this is really easy to then track things by the each, whether it's prepared sandwiches, yogurts, juices, etc. You can just kind of pop in there, put in the quantity instead of weighing things. Moving to the right to Light, this is still a nimble tablet option, but it's kind of great for teams that also have small kitchens and don't necessarily need the integrated scale option. So you can use any scale and then you're just manually putting that weight in that you're tracking on your own, and then you still get the benefit of the software and analytics platform. In the middle, we have Leanpath Scout. This is the first of the 3 that have integrated scales. So that means, of course, that the scale is speaking to the system there, the tablet. And so you'll just pop your pan on the scale, it will populate the weight within the software that we'll soon take a look at on at kind of an more up close look. And so it feeds the weight in there, and then you can go through the process, as Jennifer mentioned, of kind of tracking the particular qualities about that food waste. The Tracker 360, which Jennifer mentioned, which was used for this project, the main difference with the Tracker 360 from all of our other integrated scales is that that little green arm that you're seeing is actually a camera that sits on top. So there's kind of an AI element that's helping to recognize that food for you. But chefs love this because it's a great training tool to go ahead and take a look at, okay, maybe this is why this food was wasted. We do capture the loss reason across all of these devices, but obviously, you know, pictures are worth 1,000 words, so that can be really helpful for training. It can also be useful for your relationships with suppliers. If there was a case where something wasn't good quality, perhaps you had a pan of mussels, half of them didn't open, you can turn around and perhaps get a vendor credit as a result of that information through the photo. And then lastly, the Tracker 360 floor scale, which is exactly what it sounds like. You'll have the headpiece above where you can put in all the information, but that means that if you're disposing of large pans of food, that can get tossed right into the bin, and there isn't a second step getting your waste from the pan to the scale to the bin. Okay. So this is a basic overview. We'll run through this quickly, but of our kind of tracking portion of this proven methodology, you're simply putting food on the scale and typing in a few different pieces of key information before it gets disposed. So characterizing the food using the touch screen, we'll kind of get more into that again in a couple of slides to follow. No, go ahead, Jennifer. Yeah, so this is what, if you were looking at a headpiece or tablet, this is the screen that you're going to see. And what you would do is here on the left-hand side, what we are tracking is food waste. You can also track donations or other customizable things if you were going to reuse food for other purposes. This is a place where you could log that transaction as well. So if you go in and click the food waste button, this is the weight that we've got on the scale. Imagine there's an integrated scale. We have 13.2 pounds of food, and we're going to categorize it. So we follow in, this is where you'll have the categories of all the types of food that might be produced in a given kitchen, and this gets customized location to location. But for a broad overview, this is, going to summarize the majority of what folks will be making in any individual kitchen. So we're going into the fruit and vegetable category. And within that fruit and vegetable category, you may have more, here on this screen, we don't have a lot more detail, but you might. And this is a tray of melons. So we're going to just quick that these were melons that are being wasted. And then this is where we were going to capture the loss reason. And this is incredibly important because, of course, this is what's going to drive behavior change. So in this case, this food was presented, but it was not sold. And so we're just going to track that. And then in order to tear the weight from our pan, we're going to select what kind of pan it was. And this particular screen is showing a very advanced number of, oh, sorry, Jennifer, you're correct, but just we can go in and be very specific about the pan we're using. So of course it's tearing the weight correctly. So that's important to make sure that the data that we're collecting is quality and accurate. And then, as Jennifer mentioned, we also want to qualify where this was occurring, especially in cases where folks have many different stations in a given kitchen or all you care to eat. This will be important so that you know kind of which kiosk or outlet is responsible for this waste. So this was from the salad bar. And then what we're actually going to do with it, since it was presented but not sold, it is still safe to donate. Sorry, Jennifer, go ahead. And so we're going to categorize this as a donation. So then that captures how much is being donated of the waste that is no longer being sold at a retail outlet. Okay, next. And so this is what the screen would look like once you've completed the transaction. You can see on the right, there are some kind of key takeaways that, you know, if you were wasting this every day for a year, this is how much money that would cost your business. If you were wasting this food every day for a year, you know, these are some of the environmental impacts. So that's just really driving home what that waste means, the significance of it, which is obviously really great. And this whole thing should take about 7 seconds per transaction to give you an idea, since that's obviously not how long it took me to explain it to you. But here you go. Then you also have another view. Since the bench scale will take a picture, you've got the picture of the melon that was being wasted. You notice that the tare weight took about 3 pounds off of that total transaction, and then those other key details. And so looking into that discover portion, we've just looked at the tracking piece. Through discovery, you know, obviously the photography gives us a lot of insight onto what food was wasted, why it was wasted, and potential training opportunities in some cases, right? Maybe this has to do with butchering or cutting pieces of fish to make sure that you're getting most of that fillet off of the skin, or with fruit and vegetables, making sure that the rind, you know, like you're getting as much fruit off of the rind as possible, etc. We can go to the next slide, Jennifer. And here is a kind of a snapshot of Leanpath Online, which is the software piece that accompanies the hardware. And so this is where you can go and get data insights on everything that's being tracked. Of course, the data is only as valuable as the number of transactions that you're able to collect to make sure that it's really accurate. But you can come in here and add, you know, at a glance, look at the top wasted foods, what the value of those foods might be, and then also see those trends across the data set. So maybe there are common loss reasons. As Tyler mentioned, overproduction tends to be the most common loss reason. And so that's when you can start to take a look at batch cooking, small batches, and figure out maybe a better method for your team, you know, to begin preventing food waste at the pre-consumer level. So more information about Leanpath Online. We do have a goal setting function, and this is crucial to the drive piece of that methodology, right? This is how we're influencing behavior change. This is how folks who have a large number of sites who might be on an enterprise level are able to influence change and kind of create some healthy competition site to site. You can set goals for a single site. You can set goals for an entire team across multiple sites and retail outlets, etc. So you can see that from this note here, in a study conducted in partnership with a Leanpath enterprise client, sites that were regularly using the goals function were saving an additional 3% on cost of goods as a percent of revenue versus sites that did not use the tool. So this really does make an impact. Oh, go ahead, Jennifer. Yeah, thanks. So we just wanted to provide some key takeaways. So for a typical Leanpath user, they cut food waste by about 50% or more. And that's based on the baseline that's established in the first few weeks. They reduced those food purchase costs by about 2 to 6%. So again, referring back to the goal setting, reducing another 3% on top of that, you can see where that becomes really significant. The ROI is about 2 to 7 times the investment. And then of course, what's so important to us is creating more efficient and engaged kitchen culture, really getting teams excited about the really positive impact that they can have by reducing food waste, and feeling like they're part of that really positive change, reducing carbon footprint, and just generally making your businesses more operationally efficient. Thanks, Jennifer.
Great, thank you, Claire. So let's see here. So now I'm going to get into a little more with the case study. So there is, in each one of the facilities, there's a main kitchen that prepares and assembles the inpatient meals. It also cooks the cooked items, most of the cooked items for the retail cafeterias, and also catering that they do. It packages the grab and go items that they offer in the cafeteria. And generally, METS was noting the type and the quantity of food that they are removing from storage was noted. They note that on a form that they developed, and then usually at least they have figured they need to cook at least a third of a full pan of food in order to justify the time and effort to prepare it. But in some cases, that could lead to some overproduction as well. Kitchen staffing, this is actually an issue because the staff are a lot of the staff are hourly wage earners, and they're members of a union. So the food service workers who staff the patient tray line, making all the food for the patients, the culinary staff who are assisting the chefs in preparing the food, the hospitality associates that actually go up into the patient rooms and take their orders and deliver the food to patients, and then the staff that work in the retail cafeteria. Then there are some other management and the chefs themselves who are salaried and they're not union members. And due to the union contract issue, really only the non-union staff were asked to use the Leanpath system. So that limited the ability to probably track all the food that was getting thrown out. And generally the kitchens are all at those four facilities, or three of them at least, the hospital facilities were chronically short-staffed. So that certainly became an issue. At all four of the facilities, food's generated from the inpatient meal preparation, and then there's the uneaten inpatient meal items that are returned with their trays. However, as Tyler mentioned, there are potential issues with patient biohazard with that food, and so it wasn't. It's not measured. It goes pretty much directly to the dishwashing area and wasn't measured by the Leanpath system. And there really is no opportunity because of the biohazard issue to do any diversion of that food anyway. Then there's preparation of the food to sell in the retail cafeteria and also for catering events. However, another item is the catering. There's no real tracking or knowledge even of the waste that's generated from their catering meals because it's not returned to the kitchen and it's not measured in any way. That goes for all the disposable, products as well, the plates and napkins and silverware and all that. So none of that waste is known by METS. And then they also food waste from unsold cafeteria food that cannot be saved for reuse. Oops. So as Stephanie mentioned, health code requirements, they really can't reuse any food that wasn't cooled properly within 2 hours, and it can't be, and if it wasn't reused within 3 days, then all that food has to be thrown out. Then there's the overproduction, food that is prepared but is not eaten. And then there's spoilage. So, lettuce that goes bad or the milk that's past the labeled date. And in these kitchens, the path, there really is just disposal. They're not doing donation and they're not doing composting. So the path to disposal is that you weigh it on the Leanpath scale, take the picture, enter that basic data. And then some of it at the larger facilities was some of it is going down the sink into the garbage disposal. So that's one of the least preferred in the EPA scale. And then the rest of it is going into a trash can. So again, the least preferred option. And then all that trash is going to a landfill. The totes of trash are brought out of the kitchen to the hospital's trash compactor. And another factor here is that the food service METS does not pay for disposal. It's all going to the hospital system. So that is, if you're paying for disposal, that can give you an incentive to reduce. But when you're not, it's sort of taking away one of the incentives. So the inpatient meal service, we just have a quick slide on that because I think it is amazing to see. It's very sophisticated. When a hospitality associate delivers a meal to the patient, they take the order for the next meal. It's all entered into like a tablet, and they also verify that it's compliant with the patient's any dietary restrictions that the patient has or the doctor puts on the patient. Then the software generates a meal ticket. And the chefs then review the meal tickets for the next meal and make their plans on what they're going to cook and how much. And then the kitchen staff all use the meal ticket to prepare individualized trays with that meal ticket that go up to the patient. So hoping to minimize waste by giving patients mostly what they want. I think there are a few sort of mandatory dietary items, or to round things out. But like I said before, there's no opportunity to divert any of the waste from the inpatient meals once they're served to the patients. Then there are the retail cafeterias. Each of the facilities does have a cafeteria that primarily serves the staff working there, but also, visitors. But that's a smaller number. They offer multiple hot bar options. They provide the grab and go things. The 3 hospitals offer a salad bar, and the food generated by the cafeteria customers is also not measured or tracked and is sent to a landfill. So they do offer, all those facilities, the cafeterias do offer a collection of, mixed recycling. But I would say, like most places that have mixed recycling in a consumer, public facing area, people just generally don't seem to care that much. And there's a lot of, cross contamination and things put in the recycling bins that shouldn't go there. The catering service, basically all the facilities have 1 to 5 different events there, whether it's doctors meeting to learn about a new procedure or drug, and METS prepares and is paid for what is ordered. So again, there's not a big incentive for waste reduction because they get paid for what's ordered. And like I mentioned before, the type and the quantity of waste that's generated is not known because it's not returned to them. So there's several factors that influence the quality of the Leanpath data. The top one is that, to really get good data, you've got to be weighing everything prior to disposal. And you also need to enter all those screens correctly. So because if you don't, then the effects of that will ripple, through the data for that day and over time. So, if you don't enter the type of container correctly, so the weight is off. Also, if you enter, things by the time of day that you're actually doing the disposal and not the time of, not the meal sort of that the food was intended for, that could throw things off. So there really is the need for the people that are utilizing Leanpath to be incentivized and to really be motivated to do it, to do it correctly, because you need to get good data in order to get good information out. Also, the scale is run by software that relies on a stable internet connection, so that can also potentially create problems. So for this project, we really couldn't do a good comparison of like the baseline that was generated back in the spring of 2021. NEWMOA wasn't really involved with the project then. Our part didn't really start up, our contract didn't go through till a little after that, but also, like I said, the cafeterias really weren't operating at full capacity. And then we also, there's been pretty apparent inconsistent use of the Leanpath scale because of the staff shortages. When a lot of people don't show up, then the management folks, are scrambling to cover the gaps, and they're not always available to be, measuring and tracking the food waste. And then also we did do some categorization changes since that beginning. So we don't have really good sort of before and after data, unfortunately. We did want to try to categorize things into, is food being wasted because you're buying too much of it or because you're making too much of it? So the buying too much of it, we in our analysis sort of called it spoiled before use, which is basically these top two here, spoiled and expired because you never prepared it. So things that are going bad. And then the making too much is, we categorized in the analysis as overproduction, but that's really all these other reasons put together. And we did, this is an example of how we needed to change some of the inputs in the system. Is it used to just say expired as the reason, and that is kind of conflating two things. One would be expired because it's past the date that's on the thing and you never even opened it, but you have to throw it out because it's expired. Or, which is what we separated out into this top one here, expired, never prepared. And then this one, when you put something in, it's a leftover and you put it in the refrigerator, you want to use it within 3 days, but then you don't. So now it's 5 days later and you've got to throw it out. Well, that's also expired because it's past the date, but it is prepared food, so it's really overproduced food, it's from the overproducing, not the buying too much. So we needed to sort of get those separated out and have that be clear. So that's like one of the categorization changes that we made, but that wasn't able to happen until just July of this year. So we do see, if you do look between 2021 and 2023, there are some documented changes. So the retail cafeteria operation, you definitely expect that that's going to be going up. And you also expect inpatient meal preparation to go down. Some of these numbers are pretty dramatic, and we'll sort of talk about that a little bit later. I will note that the High Point, the assisted living facility, the extended care, that facility does have relatively stable staffing, and I think these numbers are pretty reflective. Their retail cafeteria is pretty small to begin with, and so it didn't change that much between 2021 and 23. So these are probably actually pretty representative numbers for that particular facility. However, for the hospitals, it's less clear that they're actually measuring everything. So some of these numbers can reflect maybe some of that. So, for example, if you just look at July to September of this year and the percent of the days that they actually are entering anything into the Leanpath system, this is the assisted living facility. 97% of the days they're actually are measuring waste. So that's indicating that there's good consistent use of the system. But then you can see the smaller hospital, Millard Fillmore, not so much. The Buffalo General, not so much. This Erie County Medical Center the numbers are higher, so you're a little more confident in the data that's coming from there. Unfortunately, because of the staffing issues and just how stressed out everybody was, there wasn't really the opportunity to intervene and try to get them to get these numbers all up into the 90s, unfortunately. So I will just show some data from the Erie County, the large kitchen. This is just some data about Erie County to give you some sense of the size. They've got, the cafeteria serves about 1,000 people a day. If everything was fully staffed, everybody showed up. Over the course of a day, the Mets there'd be about 50 people that would be working. That includes the hospitality associates that are going up into the inpatient rooms, but the staffing would be about 50 people. So if we look here at some of the data, and we try to, again, break it into these two buckets, whether it was overproduced or spoiled before use, and then also what meal it was associated with. Again, we also just looked at the data. So the Leanpath system has a tremendous amount of data, and you can get it in a spreadsheet so that you can cut it however you want. So we wanted to cut it into those two main buckets: overproduced or spoiled before use, the meal time, and then this, whether it was inpatient meal related or the retail cafeteria. So this indicates to me, though, that maybe they're doing clean out of some of their things that they stored for reuse later, that they're doing that at the breakfast time, because there's a large percentage that's associated with breakfast. So that's one indication, is perhaps it's related more to the time of day that they're doing some of their wasting efforts. And then if we look at the retail cafeteria, things are broken down a little bit differently. And again, lunch is the biggest meal, so you would expect that that these two both of these would be associated with lunch. Spoiled before use is the 27% and 41%. Mets didn't want us to use actual weights of tonnages here either, or pounds. And again, looking at some of the poundages, you can also sort of know that, well, maybe they're not measuring everything, but I think ECMC here was doing a fairly good job. So the observations, the data, unfortunately, presented represents a short snapshot because of all the challenges. The COVID-19 really did a number on this project. The changes that we made in the food type and the loss reasons. An example of food type is, you might have remembered on the Leanpath screen, it said sauces and gravy and soup were sort of all together, and we thought maybe that wasn't the most effective because they really do have soup, and so it would probably be good to be able to track soup separately. Then I think there was a couple of breakfast type of foods that we wanted to separate out. So we did change, again, the food type and loss reason categories, so it makes comparisons difficult. The short-staffed kitchens, and I would say also staff turnover. The management in all these kitchens, except for the assisted living facility, really did change between 2021 and 2023. And so, everybody's buy-in maybe wasn't always what started out as good, maybe changed over time. So between the kitchens being short-staffed and all the stress that creates, and then the staff turnover, and maybe not re-upping the buy-in of everybody, is also an observation, a challenge. And then, there's the data quality challenges that we mentioned, because not all the food is weighed before disposal, perhaps. The input choices are not always accurate, so that can ripple through. So the recommendations coming out of the project related to food waste, the facilities should still definitely continue using Leanpath because the data, however imperfect, does prompt action. They do look at the data and what even though it's imperfect, they do look at it and talk about it every couple weeks, Mets and the chefs. So they should definitely continue to use that, but they should really make an effort to improve the data quality and the usefulness of it, because they really should try to re-up everybody's energy about it by having some on-site training. Just having everybody tune into a webinar maybe isn't as effective as I know Leanpath has some really dynamic chefs on their staff that really can, get everybody motivated. So I think some on-site training would be helpful. I think when the union contracts renew, it would be helpful to add the ability or the requirement even that the union folks can assist with the food tracking and minimization. Another one is that Erie County should work with Mets and the hospital facilities to institute composting of the food waste for all the kitchen generated stuff, everything that doesn't actually go to the patient rooms. And a couple of the facilities, definitely the bigger kitchens really do have the room to have food waste. You could easily put, instead of throwing everything into the trash, instead of having the trash can there, you could have the compost collection right there at the Leanpath scale. Mets should observe what's frequently thrown away from the inpatient food, so they could make an effort to observe, things that are coming back from the patient rooms and maybe adjusting the portion sizes or the menu offerings based on that. And they should, Erie County should work with the hospitals to implement an educational waste reduction plan for catering operations. We didn't directly observe the catering, but just from my general experience with events and catering, there's always too much and there's a lot of waste. And so really looking at what can be done to, give people some motivation, to the people that are ordering the catered food, the people that are managing the waste from the catering to be motivated to really minimize food waste. And then we had a few last recommendations for non-food waste reduction. Right now everything is disposable in the cafeterias pretty much, and they should really evaluate offering reusable tableware for the dine-in patrons. People are going to eat in the cafeteria. They could have, real silverware maybe instead of disposable. As Tyler mentioned earlier, you really should only utilize the plastic takeout containers that do have recycling markets, just to send the correct signals into the system. A lot of people now are starting to use number 6 clear plastic for their clamshell containers. You might notice that yourself when you get takeout, and those are not recyclable. Number 6 is polystyrene. It's not in the styrofoam format with all the air, but it's still polystyrene. It does not have a recycling market. A lot of places are using it, probably because it's cheaper to purchase, but it's really sending the wrong signals into the whole economic system. So, they really should only use number 1 or number 2 plastic containers. Erie County should work with the hospitals and Mets to institute better recycling education and improve the signage, because then, like I mentioned before, the mixed recycling really does have significant contamination. And there should be efforts to make sure all kitchen generated packaging is recycled to the extent feasible. All the big cans that they open. I did observe some cardboard boxes going into the trash. So, trying to make sure that all the recycling can be recycled to the extent feasible. And that's pretty much it. So, I don't know if anybody's been looking at questions and wants to put a few out there. I do see that there are some. I yeah, the case study and the guide will be available on the NEWMOA website, and we'll send around links when we send an email to everybody that attended today where they can find those. Let's see, can you provide the source of the 4 to 10% typical waste of what food is purchased? That is, that came off of a Leanpath slide that we got, but that Leanpath slide does have a reference on it, but I don't know it off the top of my head. So we can share that later, but that's just a typical, from the amount of food that a food service kitchen purchases, about 4 to 10% of that money ends up as waste. Let's see, regulatory issues with sending food waste to farms for animal feed. So definitely if it's for cows and sheep, the ruminants, there's a lot more restrictions for sure. So there are regulatory issues for all of it. But if it's for pigs and chickens, there's a lot of less concerns. If meat products are processed, like deli meats and that sort of thing, those can go to chickens and pigs. There's a lot less with chicken and pigs, but it's still something people need to be aware of. Here, Tyler, maybe this is one for you. How did you fund the purchase of Leanpath for the hospitals?
So Erie County, well, my department within Erie County, the Department of Environment and Planning, is primarily funded through grants. So we were able to receive a New York State Department of Environmental Conservation grant that was able to fund the purchase of the scales for the hospitals. And one thing that we didn't mention during the presentation, but is beneficial to add, is that while the funding for the grant funding for the scales ends at the end of this calendar year, the hospitals, all 4 of the facilities, have seen the benefit in having them, and they all committed to continuing the lease of the equipment in-house and paying for that lease ongoing after this program ends.
Great, thanks, Tyler. I think Claire covered this, but we can say it again. How much staff time does it take to input all of the data into Leanpath?
Yeah, so can you hear me, Jennifer?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. I think my microphone had kind of timed out earlier. So I wanted to make a comment about the 4 to 10% question as well. But first I'll say the average time to clock a transaction is about 7 seconds. And we find that usually adds up to about an hour for the team over the course of the week. And then regarding the 4 to 10% number, that's corroborated by data that Leanpath has collected with customers over the last 20 years, just based on average food spend and then the waste calculated from that food spend.
Right. Okay. So somebody is commenting, and I think we found this at the hospitals too. One of the top reasons for wasted food and the barriers to making changes is, and they typically work with schools, is that lack of staff. And are there recommendations? And that's a tough one, but I think, motivating people, it really shouldn't take a huge amount of time, but it will take some time. It's motivating people to the importance, why they should care personally, and that it's not a huge time sink,
Right. And I'll add, Jennifer, if I can, that even though it is particularly challenging when there's high turnover and you're having to train and train and train again, even with limited staff, there is an argument for being more efficient with your time and resources. And if you're spending a lot of time preparing food that gets thrown away, that's a waste of that labor and all of that effort right? So as Jennifer was saying, just really driving the engagement and messaging and creating buy-in with your team, I think kind of answers that
Right.
issue.
Okay. Here's another one for Leanpath for Claire. Do sites stay with the program long term, years and years and years, or if you leave Leanpath after, a couple of years, does the behavior changes continue, or what's the experience?
So yes, we do have sites that stay with us for years and years. I think once you've kind of established, right, you've created the baseline, then you have driven waste reduction, and then you want to maintain that reduction. It isn't something that just kind of resolves itself on a daily basis, especially because, as we've been talking about, there is staff turnover, there are new people coming through, and so you really do need it to be a cultural change and something that's just part of, right, you're kind of changing business as usual as wasting food to business as usual is driving prevention on a day-to-day basis. And as far as some sites who've stopped using our program, it's on occasion because they have designed a program internally that they've decided to use instead. But I would say that, yeah, folks don't maintain the level of success around reduction if they are not tracking, even if that's with pen and paper. You need to collect the data to drive the action.
Yes. Great. Thanks, Claire.
Sure.
For food safety donations, do you allow food donation of food that is date marked past the 7 days? What are the rules around donating the date marked food? So I think it's somewhat up to the receiving facility, but for simplicity, a lot of people do just want things that are not past the date that's marked, and unfortunately, that generates a lot of unnecessary, in my opinion, waste. But the Harvard Food Law Policy Clinic developed fact sheets not just for New York State, but for many other states. I think they've done 20 states now. They've got them, on the date labels, the tax incentives, a lot of the different topics, the food, animal feed. I couldn't find a link to just give a general link where everybody could go and then find your own state. But if you Googled, fact sheet for your state, you probably can find it if they did them for your state. So that's a place to get a little bit more clear information as well. But like I said, unfortunately, a lot of people do rely on those date labels, and that creates a lot of unnecessary waste. Let's see, I don't know this answer, and I don't know if anybody on here knows this. Can biohazards be destroyed in a commercial compost facility? It's high temperatures at a commercial compost facility. I think some of the concern is with before it gets there, dealing with the waste, but I don't know if anybody knows. I don't, unfortunately.
I am not certain, but I know that there's been ongoing, at least in New York State, I believe New York State has been doing ongoing tests to see about the destruction of biohazards in a compost setting. I don't know where you could go to find the results on that, but I believe it was a New York State DEC, Department of Environmental Conservation, effort. And I could be wrong on that, but I think over the past couple of years, that's been an effort that they've been working on to see how that's impacted by compost.
Right. All right, well, we're running up against time. There are a few other questions. Someone asked about whether we have estimated relative quantities about the different sources of food waste. Is most of it from the retail cafeteria and just some of it is from the inpatient meal prep? We don't, like I said, the plate waste from the patients wasn't measured. The plate waste from the cafeteria folks, the post-consumer stuff, that's not measured either. So I don't know if there's been a study out there that looks generally at those numbers, but we certainly don't have them through this project about, how much is what. Here's something for Leanpath to try to uh, outline though, because I know there are like champions in each kitchen. So should a facility have one or two dedicated Leanpath staff, people dedicated to the system? Maybe you can talk a little bit more about how Leanpath
Yes.
prefers things to work.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as Jennifer mentioned, we do have champions and co-champions to kind of help support each other through the implementation of a new program and then keeping people on track. They would also be the folks who would be spending the most time in the software to look at the data. And we do have enterprise solutions as well. So if there's somebody that needs to look at like 30 different sites, they can look at that and aggregate that data in one place. And then you also have the site level data. But we believe there should be a champion in every kitchen, right? Because that's where things are happening in real time. And I hope it goes without saying this would not be, it's not a full-time Leanpath champion, but someone who is taking that on as part of their other responsibilities. And of course, it's great if it's somebody with, an executive chef or somebody who has all of the kind of skills and understanding about culinary systems and output.
Okay. Let's see. Then there's one last question that maybe Tyler can address as well about are the takeout containers number one and number two really recyclable? They had been talking with their materials recycling facility, their MRF, that they really only want bottles and jugs and milk jugs and bottles and things like that. That sort of the clamshell containers or the other food containers, even though they're made with one or two, really don't end up being recycled.
Right. Size is a big issue in the MRFs. The smaller the item, the more chance that it has to cause an issue in the system, in the sorting, from a sorting perspective, as well as from a mechanical standpoint. It could get jammed in the systems and clog the system. And so small items are really frowned upon. And because the clamshells compress into very thin, flat material, they tend to clog up the machinery in the MRFs, and so that's why it's not they don't really prefer having that waste stream in their operations. Here in Western New York, we have a couple different recyclers, and I know depending on your area, you may have recyclers that are more interested in various different waste streams. And I guess it's just important to be familiar with your local MRFs and see if the waste streams that they take in fall in line with the waste streams that you intend on generating.
Okay, and we'll take one last question and then I'm going to have to go, but I know this was one that's on everybody's mind, which is the cost of Leanpath. And is it a subscription or is it a one-time payment? How does that work?
Yeah, so I will point out that obviously all of our email addresses are here, so please follow up with me directly because I can provide more comprehensive pricing depending on the size of your operation. But it is a subscription service. You subscribe to both the software and the hardware. Some folks do decide to purchase the hardware outright. We really only recommend that for enterprise sites where you need to roll out maybe hundreds of devices at the same time. Obviously, the benefit for subscribing to the hardware is that Leanpath is then responsible for any mechanical failures or issues. Those things get easily repaired and replaced for you. But yeah, so the pricing does range from about $1,900 per year per site up to about $8,000 per year per site. And that includes both hardware and software. That includes an account manager and personalized coaching. There are a lot of kind of different kind of packages or features that can be added or subtracted depending on the budget that you're working with, but that's the range that you can expect.
Great. Well, thank you so much to all of our presenters. I think in the slides there, Leanpath has documented that usually, even though it does cost money, you usually save at least twice what you're spending in the reduced food waste. So overall, it should be worth it. And some places save even more. So I really want to thank our presenters today, Tyler from Erie County, Stephanie from NEWMOA, and Claire from Leanpath. And I really want to thank all of you who have hung in there and attended this webinar. I hope you found it useful and interesting. We will send out a email once the slides and the recording are posted on the NEWMOA website, and also links to the documents. And I hope everybody enjoys the rest of their day. Thank you. Bye-bye.